Chavin, but I also know that for many among us, this evening marks the first encounter with Chavin, the most unknown culture among the most prominent early cultures in the world. You will see how the ancient peoples of Peru created their world, what was important in their rituals, how they brought art and architecture to perfection. I'm overwhelmed by the extraordinary quality of these very ancient works of art. They express artistic strength, they are manifold yet of an astounding, most impressive simplicity. It is a great honor for us to welcome tonight His Excellency Luis Beirano, Minister of Culture of the Republic of Peru. Welcome, Your Excellency. We express our deep gratitude to the government and the people of Peru for letting all these important treasures of national importance travel to Switzerland exclusively. I also extend my thanks to His Excellency Juan Carlos Gamarra, Ambassador of Peru, for his kind help and support. Of crucial importance for the success of this exhibition was the Swiss ambassador in Lima, Anne-Pascale Grauer-Müller. She was enthusiastic from the beginning. Our ambassador in Lima is, and this is amazing, also an archaeologist. What a perfect combination for our project. The city of Zurich is represented today by the President of the City Parliament, Albert Leiser, welcome, the Mayor of Zurich, Corinne Mauch, and by Martin Vollwieder, Head of the Department of Finances, herzlich willkommen. To the Director of the Federal Office of Culture, Jean-Frédéric Josselin, I extend a sincere welcome as well as our gratitude. With the financial help of the Federal Office and the support of the Rietberg Society, we were able to open a national studio for stone conservation and restoration in Chavin. We also thank Benno Wittmer from the Federal Office for his engagement, as well as Gregor Freiner, who as a specialist in stone conservation established the new studio in Chavin. Almost all loans come from Peru. El Museo Nacional de Chavin is the most prominent lender, presented today by Marcelo Olivas Weston. Where is she? We received loans from the Museo Kulturvasi, welcome Yoshio Onuki, from the Museo Nacional de Arqueología, Antropología y Historia in Lima, the Museo de la Nación, Museo de la Universidad Nacional Mayor de San Marcos, Museo Larco, represented tonight by its director Andrés Álvarez Calderón, Museo de Arte de Lima, the Banco Central de Reserva del Perú, la Fundación Museo Amano, represented tonight by Masaharu Watanabe. Thank you all much for this cooperation and your support. In addition to the loans from Peru, the exhibition displays loans from Dumbarton Oaks in Washington, D.C., the Metropolitan Museum in New York, the Museum of the University of Pennsylvania, the St. Louis Art Museum, and the Cleveland Museum of Art. A milestone in the exhibition project was our initiative to organize a symposium in Lima in early 2011. Most of the archaeologists working in the formative period of Peru attended and agreed on a new chronology of the early period of Peruvian culture. Most importantly, also agreed upon a cooperation in this project. My first thanks go to Luis Lumbreras, the doyen of Chavin archaeology, who unfortunately, due to medical reasons, was forced to cancel his trip to Zurich. We are honored and pleased to welcome Yoshio Onuki of Tokyo University, who for decades has been most successfully working in Peru. Thanks to his generosity, we are able to present complete inventories of 3 tomes from Kulturvasi containing the earliest ritual garments in gold found on the American continents. For 20 years now, John Rick from Stanford University in California, as well as his wife Rosa, have been excavating in Chavin. Welcome and thanks. Would you, Professor Onuki, this coming Saturday at 2 p.m., Professor Onuki and Professor Rick will giving public talks in our auditorium in the Park Villa. Furthermore, I would like to welcome the other archaeologists involved in our project, either working in Peru and or contributing essays to our catalogue. Jordi Isla from Lima and Martin Reindl from the German Archaeological Institute in Bonn, both working in the Nazca region, Peter Fuchs from Berlin excavating Sechin-Bajo in the Kasma Valley, and Henning Bischof from Mannheim. We are also proud to present several multimedia installations and 2 highly informative films on Chavin, one by Arcton 3D Company, the other by Marion Friedrich and Otto C. Honecke. Tonight at 9 o'clock, you should not miss the documentary on Chavin on Swiss television, the program Einstein. You can certainly imagine that exhibitions like this are very costly. We are deeply indebted to the sponsors of the exhibition, Novartis and its president Daniel Vasella, as well as to Katharina Dorn, president of the Parozia Foundation. Both are on the board of our Friends Society and the most active and generous sponsors and donors of our museum. Without this support, this exhibition could never have been realized. Additional funds we received from the Adina Foundation, as well as from Pro Helvetia and the Rahn Kulturfonds. Last but not least, I wish to thank Barbara and Eberhard Fischer, the president of the Rietberg Society. Due to their private sponsorship, we were able to commence this project 4 years ago. They provided the funds for a positioning at our museum with the aim to create an exhibition on Peru. Have I forgotten anybody? Yes, indeed, I have. Whenever I used the term we in my speech, I should in fact have said Peter Fuchs. Peter is not only the curator of this show, but the driving force behind it and all its manifold projects. With creativity, enthusiasm and enormous effort, he has achieved an extraordinary result, notably his very first exhibition, an astounding show which you will certainly not forget.
Well, I have to say that it's a pleasure to be here with very well-known faces and friends and people who really have been working very much about our culture in Peru. Madame Corinne Moch, Mayor of Zurich, Dr. John Frederick Jocelyn, Director of the Federal Office of Culture, Dr. Albert Tutz, Director of the Rietberg Museum, Dr. John Rick and wife, Mr. Peter Fuchs, curator of the exhibition, ladies and gentlemen. When I was told that I had to be in Zurich to inaugurate this wonderful exhibition, I was kind of scared. I had been in Chavin just once, and I've been watching John Rick working with his students, and didn't dare to interrupt him. But I was really impressed for what Chavin is. We are now gathered here for the presentation of this first exhibition. This is the very first exhibition on Chavin culture and the origin of civilization in the Andean area, called, wonderful title, Chavin, the enigmatic temple of the Peruvian Andes, which is a very good title. This is an effort to bring new scientific contributions in our territory and the richness to the world. The Chavin-de Ceremonial Center, located in a knot of roads linking the provinces of Ancash, Huánuco, and Lima, is iconic for our history and national identity. Located in a narrow alley formed by the Pushka River or Moshna and one of its tributaries, Huajetska, Chavin-de is one of the most important monuments of Peru and South America, both for its architecture and its arts and its historical and symbolic significance. This is a long story. I have been learning about that, but I would like to share you that when Pedro Cieza de León, who was the first Westerner to mention its existence, there was a kind of an ideal to follow in the 17th century. Jan Antonio Espinosa Vázquez recorded a description of the temple as told by the neighboring residents. The site of Chavin-de will have to wait until the middle of the 19th century to regain its national standing, thanks to the contribution of the Italian scholar Antonio Raimondi and the German explorer Middendorf. However, the first scientific investigations were performed at the beginning of the 20th century by the Peruvian specialist Julio César Tello, who is considered the father of the Peruvian archaeology. With the discovery of Chavin-de Tello founded the cornerstone of his autochtonista or autochthonous theory. The Chavin culture, which is always related as one of the oldest civilizations in Peru, was regarded as the parent culture of the pre-Hispanic Peruvian cultures, the origin of civilization in Peru. Tello believed that the widespread dissemination of Chavin arts was evidence of how strong a state it had been in his time. The efforts of Tello to recover this important site were followed by the work of other notable archaeologists, such as Bennett at the end of the 30s, Rowe in the 60s, Amat at the last years of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s, and after that Fung, Berger, and Kaufa, and Iriarte, and Lumbreras, and Onuki, and John Rick and his wife recently, Rosa Mendoza. As a result of this work, we now know that Chavin-de was a sacred pilgrimage center welcoming people from various areas and distances that arrive at the temple carrying offerings to the gods and asking for its auspices. Our Nobel Prize, Mario Vargas Llosa, has written about that even he considered himself an agnostic. It was impossible, even to him, not to recognize the sacred values of that site. All this material and symbolic wealth led this monument to be incorporated by UNESCO in 1985 as part of the World Heritage Site list. Dear friends, we can be truly proud of this beautiful display of Chavin culture. This is why I express my sincere gratitude to the Rietberg Museum for the effort made in showing to the world this small but significant part of the richness of our heritage. In this effort, the Ministry of Culture of Peru has not hesitated in giving the museum its full collaboration and support in the selection and gathering of the pieces you are about to admire. There's nothing I could say, there's nothing left to say, but to declare with great pleasure to open this wonderful exposition, the enigmatic temple both the Peruvian and this Chavin.
It's a great pleasure to be here, and on behalf of my wife Rosa and myself, I want to thank the Rietberg Museum for giving us the opportunity to make a small contribution in the formation of this exhibition. And in particular, I want to recognize the work that they have done as an exceptional action of putting together an exhibit, a truly wonderful exhibit that I think is unparalleled in anything I've seen for this time period. For years, I've had the privilege of working in Chavin, almost 2 decades now. And for that, I really want to thank the country of Peru and the people of Peru for having taken in a foreigner and allowed him to work in a site that is as exceptional as Chavin de Huántar. This site has much to say, and of course this exhibit, in great part, is about what it has to say. But it is truly a generosity of a country that accepts a foreign archaeologist to work in one of the most important archaeological sites. And for that, I am truly and deeply grateful. Now, as archaeologist, I suppose I should probably talk about Chavin and say just a few words, but I promise to be short. The message is not so much about the site, it's about the time period that Chavin represents. This is a time of transition, and while perhaps everyone could say that about their time, I think Chavin could say this with exceptional force. This is a time of transition from a relatively egalitarian society, not completely by any means, and there are antecedents to Chavin. Long before 1200 or 1500 BC, when Chavin begins to function as a major series of temples, there were already monumental structures in the Andes. But Chavin and its contemporary sites, such as Kunturwasi, that Professor Onuki has so ably investigated and is well represented in the exhibit, but it is at this time period that it seems that culture indeed crystallizes and starts going through some sort of a transition. But it's not just a culture that begins to make museumable objects. It's a culture that was very much using these objects in this transition. These are not mute objects of art. These are objects of interaction and transition, and they need to be seen this way, and I'm proud to say that this exhibit very much exhibits them in that way. This is a time in which leadership and authority began to be strongly expressed in the Andes. Individuals who, for whatever reason, and I think we have to actively ask the question, for what reason? Because this is the reason that we have to look back on. Why are we in the condition of society that we are in today? Where did our organizations and our strong systems of authority come from? I think it's important that human beings look at themselves as an object of study, and I think Chavin is one of those wonderful places which over its 800 to 1,000 year life saw a major part of that transition and the beginning of life in a highly organized and, yes, hierarchical condition. Individuals with privilege and power way beyond that of others. Where did that come from? Well, many have argued that that's an economic product of somehow capturing economic capabilities and concentrating them in the hands of a few. I beg to differ in part. I think it has a great deal to do with what we believe and what we believe is appropriate. How do we find acceptable power in the hands of a few? That is the concept of authority. Recognized and accepted power. But that's not an easy thing to convince cantankerous human beings of. We don't so easily accept that. And I don't think it was easy 3,000 years ago. Rather, I think it had to be done through exceptional means. And those exceptional means are, yes, Chavin and its contemporary sites. An ability to get inside the human mind and make an argument that there is a reason why leadership is just and correct, and why some have greater levels of privilege. I won't go deeper into that right now, but I would like to ask you, as you see this, to read the objects that you see. Take them, yes, as great achievements in artistic expression, but realize that these are the very objects which were designed to create the mentalities, to do the convincing, to get people to believe that not only is a strong order in society possible, but inevitable. This was a time in which creativity was used extensively. This was human minds thinking about how to get other human minds to think in a similar but very different way. As has been suggested, this was a time in which culture was changing and manipulated. It was also a time, something well worth reflecting, in which religion was radical. Not something we see very often. Religion tends to reinforce existing ideals of society. I will argue and invite you to see if you think maybe I'm right in the exhibit, to contemplate the idea that religion, ideology, could be a way to reorganize society, to completely restructure it. And it's an argument of access to gods, to access to greater powers. And appropriately, that's done in temples, and that's just what was done in this time period. Along the way, there was innovation, major innovation, because you didn't convince people with the same old stuff. You had to make something new. Metals, yes. Textiles of new types, an impressive technique come along. Pottery, which is exceptionally well represented in this exhibition, fantastic pottery. Individual pottery, not mass-made pottery at all. Every piece you see here is individual. All these innovations, architecture I left out and should not, create contexts for the changes in society that occurred here. I want to underline the significance of the exhibit. This is indeed the first Chavin exhibit. And it's one of the first exhibits of this time period, equivalent time period, from other parts of the world. Quite often we go for the biggest states or the grandest empires that had the biggest monuments. Chavin was not always the biggest, but the very quality of the works that it produced talk about its characteristics, its striving and competition for authority and power. I think there's also a special reason why this exhibit should exist. Chavin was a time of interaction. You don't bring people together in these new ways. You don't try to create fantastic objects. You don't search for rare raw materials without interacting extensively. We know that many of the objects that you see here were produced in one part of the Andes and came into the archaeological sites, or came to be archaeological objects, in other places. They moved. There was interaction, human interaction behind them. So in a way, I see this exhibit as just another piece of travel for these objects that were meant to carry a message, that were meant to talk to people and convert the way they think. And thus, I see this as totally appropriate. I think the priests of Chavin would have celebrated their outreach and felt that their efforts had come to exceptional end in this exhibit. But I beg you to look at these objects as part of that process and realize that they're the outcome of tremendous work today, putting together a great exhibit, but a very interesting series of efforts in the past that we're still in the middle of deciphering. Thank you very much.
Exzellenzen, Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, jetzt habe ich einen schweren Stand. Aber ich habe zwei gute Ausreden. Zum ersten sind meine Lippen ein bisschen flatterhaft nach meinem Effort mit dem Muschelhorn. Und zum zweiten bin ich chavinisiert. Nur gerade wenige Treppenstufen weiter unten erwartet Sie nun Chavin. Doch bevor Sie den Weg in die Ausstellung auf sich nehmen, möchte ich jenen Personen verdanken, welche die Weltpremiere hier in Zürich ermöglicht haben. Und im Anschluss muss ich Sie noch auf die Risiken und Nebenwirkungen von Chavin aufmerksam machen. Meine Damen und Herren, ohne die umfangreiche Unterstützung von Barbara und Eberhard Fischer hätte ich mich diesem Projekt nie widmen können. Sie haben mir den Einstieg in die berufliche Museumswelt ermöglicht. Ihnen bin ich zutiefst dankbar und herzhaft verbunden. Unser Direktor Albert Lutz hat mir und dem Projekt immer und uneingeschränkt sein Vertrauen und Unterstützung geschenkt. Das hat mir Mut gegeben und tief beeindruckt. So arbeiten zu können, schätze ich als große Freude. Herzlichen Dank, lieber Albert. Meine ersten archäologischen Gehversuche in Peru durfte ich im Nazca-Projekt des Deutschen Archäologischen Instituts machen, unter geduldiger, freundschaftlich und äußerst lehrreichen Begleitung der Projektleiter Markus Reindl und Johnny Isla. Ich freue mich außerordentlich über deren Anwesenheit. Sie haben mir die Vorbereitungen und als Katalogautoren auch wesentlich zu dieser Ausstellung beigetragen. Das, was ich als Ausstellungsthema aufgreifen konnte, sind Resultate von Menschen, die sich der Archäologie Perus verschrieben haben. Wir haben heute, wie bereits erwähnt, wichtige Vertreter der andinen Archäologie unter uns. Meine ganze Bewunderung und Dankbarkeit gehört diesen Persönlichkeiten. Ganz besonders freue ich mich über die Anwesenheit von John und Rosa Rick sowie Yoshio und Keiko Onuki. Wir bedauern sehr, dass Professor Lumbreras aus gesundheitlichen Gründen seine Reise nach Zürich in letzter Minute absagen musste. Wenn Sie einen Katalog kaufen, was Sie hoffentlich alle tun, können Sie zu einem guten Preis eine dazu passende Baumwolltasche kaufen. Sie stammt vom unabhängigen Kinderhilfswerk Fraternitas in Casmotal, Peru. Die Auflage der schönen Taschen ist limitiert, also kaufen Sie unbedingt noch heute. Guter Zweck inbegriffen. Als jüngstes Mitglied im Kuratorium konnte ich stets auf die große Erfahrung meiner Kolleginnen und Kolleginnen zurückgreifen. Vielen Dank euch allen. Jetzt wollen wir aber unsere Aufmerksamkeit Chavin zuwenden. Es erwartet Sie Chavin, eine Weltpremiere. In diesem Saal hier, dem Novartis-Saal, werden Sie ab morgen den ausführlichen Dokumentarfilm über die Archäologie in Chavin von Marion Friedrich und Otto Honecker sehen können. Im Ausstellungssaal unten begegnen uns beim ersten Rundgang mit einer Einführung in die unvergleichliche naturräumliche Vielfalt der Andenregion von Peru. Die Bühne einer einzigartigen Kulturgeschichte. Es werden Ihnen multimedial die ältesten Monumentalgebäude, Gemeinschaftswerke präsentiert, aus Stein und Lehmziegeln gebaute Zeremonialzentren von Gemeinschaften, die vor 5.500 Jahren in den küstennahen Flussoasen mit der Bewässerungslandwirtschaft begannen und somit bemerkenswert früh weltweit den Grundstein für eine komplexe gesellschaftliche Organisation legten. Jene frühen Zeremonialzentren, die ältesten finden wir in den Küstenregionen, sind archäologisch weitgehend fundleer. Die Prozessionsreliefs von Serra Sechin leiten Sie über in den nächsten Themenbereich. Im 2. Jahrtausend vor Christus begann sich spezialisiertes Kunsthandwerk zu etablieren. Töpfer schufen hochwertige Figurengefäße, die uns unglaublich modern anmuten. Goldschmiede fertigten Ritualschmuck, Steinhandwerker mythische bebilderte Teller und Becher. Wir können davon ausgehen, dass sich mit dem Kunsthandwerk auch eine Gesellschaftsordnung etablierte, mit gefestigten sozialen Unterschieden. Genießen Sie den Anblick und die ungeheure Kreativität, die in den Exponaten zum Ausdruck kommt. Noch nie waren die ersten kunsthandwerklichen Erzeugnisse Perus in einer Sonderausstellung so zu sehen. Der Rundgang führt Sie nun von der Küstenwüste ins Hochland zur Tempelanlage von Kunturwasi, in Quechua-Sprache Condor Nest. In Kuntervasi im nördlichen Hochland Perus konnten die Archäologen eine entscheidende Entwicklung in der frühesten Kulturgeschichte der Anden nachvollziehen. Yoshio Onuki und sein Team entdeckten in den Fundamenten der Tempelanlage die ältesten rituellen Prunkgräber Amerikas aus dem frühen 1. Jahrtausend vor Christus. 3 vollständige Grabinventare können Sie mitsamt dem üppigen Goldschmuck, der älteste rituelle Goldschmuck Amerikas, bestaunen. Diese Funde von Kuntervasi zeigen uns, wie nun Tempelbauten im Hochland die ältesten Zeremonialzentren und Versammlungsorte ablösen. Nun haben wir es nicht mehr mit einem Versammlungsort einer Agrargemeinschaft zu tun, sondern mit Heiligtümern und Tempelherren, mächtigen Götterpriester, denen der Zugang zur übernatürlichen Welt der Götter möglich war. Archäologisch können wir eine Priesterkaste fassen, die höchste gesellschaftliche Stellung innehatte. Und nun, meine Damen und Herren, nun folgt der Gang zur Tempelanlage von Chavin de Huántar, des mächtigsten Tempelbaus der Anden zu jener Zeit. Passen Sie auf, nun machen wir Chavin mit Ihnen, wie John Rick sagt, we are making Chavin with you. Seien Sie entspannt, ein bisschen zumindest, denn wir haben uns bemüht, Ihnen den Einstieg etwas zu entschärfen. Bevor Sie in Chavin eintreten, können Sie sich einen Film anschauen von der Firma Arctron, in unserem Auftrag gemacht, der Ihnen die Architektur, das Konzept und die Funktion des Tempels näher bringt. Am Eingang zum Chavin-Bereich wird Ihnen ein Textil auffallen. Es ist mit einem Spiegel ausgestellt, das exemplarisch zeigt, um was es hier geht. Im Original betrachtet sehen Sie eine üppig geschmückte Person, vermutlich ein Priester. Er blickt nach oben und hat mit den Jaguarzähnen bestückten Mund. Es wird damit symbolisch gezeigt, dass die Persönlichkeit übernatürliche Kräfte angenommen hat, sich in transformiertem Mischwesenzustand befindet und bereits eine andere Welt erblickt. Betrachten Sie dann das Textil im Spiegel. Sie werden staunen, denn nun erkennen Sie in derselben Darstellung ein herabfliegendes Wesen, aus dessen Mund etwas herauskommt, vermutlich Feldfrüchte. Es ist ein göttliches, fliegendes Wesen. Der springende Punkt dabei ist, Priester und fliegendes Götterwesen sind dasselbe. Das spricht für die ungeheure Macht dieser Götterpriester von Chavin. Wir gehen heute davon aus, dass der Tempel von Chavin ein Pilgerzentrum der Lokalelite weit entfernter Regionen war. Sie durften den beschwerlichen Weg von der Küstenoasen über die Cordillera Blanca auf sich nehmen. Sie erfuhren an Leib und Seele die Kräfte der Natur. Am Tempel angekommen, stiegen sie zuerst in den rechteckigen großen Platz hinab. Das ist der erste Saal des Chavin-Bereichs in unserer Ausstellung. Hier erhaschen Sie eine Ahnung des geheimnisvollen Treibens weiter oben im Tempelbereich. Sie erblicken aus Distanz prächtig bekleidete Priester, die in den Fassadenöffnungen und Portalen wie aus dem Nichts erschienen. Skulpturenköpfe in der Tempelfassade geben weiter Aufschluss über das Geschehen. Sie zeigen in der Serie die Transformation des Menschen zum Mischwesens, den Übertritt in einen anderen Wahrnehmungszustand symbolisierend. Von weit her hören wir Muscheltrompetenklänge, bei uns kunstvoll eingespielt, kunstvoller als ich das da gemacht habe, und erarbeitet vom namhaften Schweizer Posaunisten Michael Fluri. Wir bewegen uns weiter zum runden Platz. Dieser Tempelbereich ist intim. Die Außengeräusche sind kaum noch zu hören, der Horizont wird von den Tempelgebäuden bestimmt. Hier sind wir nun im exklusiven Ritualbereich. Die Muscheltrompetenklänge sind chorisch schwebend, die unterirdisch angelegten Wasserkanäle geben ein konzertiertes, donnergrollendes Geräusch von sich. Reliefplatten zeigen mythische Mischwesen mit Schlangenhaaren, Reißzähnen und exzentrisch nach oben blickenden Augen. Sie sind in einer Prozession. Und nun folgt der Eintritt in den exklusivsten und verborgensten Bereich des Tempels. Sie können eintreten in die von uns nachgestellte Lanzonenkammer. Sie begegnen, wie damals, die privilegierten Priesterreisenden, Pilgerreisenden, in Begleitung eines Tempelpriesters der mächtigen Götterstatue El Lanzon. Die Geräuschkulisse, die Musik, das Licht, in Klammern, die damals eingenommenen psychoaktiven Substanzen, dürfen wir hier im Museum leider nicht abgeben. Ein multimediales Megaspektakel. Wir haben es für Sie exklusiv nachempfunden, zusammen mit Michael Fluri. Modern, verstörend, überwältigend, eben We are making Chavin with you. Zum Abschluss repräsentieren wir Ihnen anhand der weltweit schönsten Kunstwerke die peripheren Einflüsse von Chavin, anhand der Paracas-Kultur und die wiederaufgenommene Bildsprache in der Moche-Kultur. Damit werden Sie sehen, Chavin kann durchaus als Mutterkultur der Anden bezeichnet werden. Die Innovationen sind überwältigend und für die Jahrtausende prägend. Nun wünsche ich allen viel Freude und Vergnügen in der Ausstellung. Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.